The city's primary gangsters is Avon Barksdale, head of the Barksdale organization. Avon is the show's main kingpin for 3 seasons, being the main target of the Major Crimes Unit in Season 1. Propagating the New Day Co-op, an alliance between rival drug dealers where they favor diplomacy over violence. Proposition Joe provides the good dope in exchange for territory. Everyone shares and pitches in, and any issues or grievances are brought to the table. Avon, however, isn't up for this new business outlook on life. He's just a gangster, I suppose, as is Marlo Stanfield, a rival Westside up-and-comer who Avon goes to war with. War which brings bodies and heat from the cops and threatens to ruin the good work the co-op have done to avoid bloodshed. As a result, Stringer gives Avon up to the cops and he is sent back to the can, and Stringer himself is killed after his scheming comes back to haunt him. Now, who was right between Avon and Stringer is something we've already discussed on the show's Wholesaler. Avon clearly has a heavy pull in prison, with him having established himself as a powerhouse inside the walls of Jessup. Now, after Marlo is forced to leave the game, having reigned dictator-like over the New Day Co-op, the Baltimore gangsters seem to go back to the Alliance mentality. In the Season 5 montage, we see Slim Charles and Fat-Face Rick talking to the Greeks, implying that they now jointly head the co-op, or at least represent it when meeting with the Greeks. Prop Joe and Stringer Bell's legacy lives on through the co-op, and Slim Charles is one of the rare winners of the show, first appearing in Season 3 as hired muscle for the Barksdales, and when most of them are sent to jail, he goes to work for Prop Joe as his number 2. Now, what I wanted to discuss today is what exactly happens when Avon Barksdale gets out. In chess terms, Avon is the king, and a line in Season 1 tells us the king stays the king, and many have theorized that Slim Charles, the former loyal Barksdale soldier, is keeping the seat warm for Avon, waiting for him to return and stepping aside so Avon can take his rightful throne. But is this actually true? Whether we'd like to imagine it or not, is it likely to happen, or is it a romanticization from the Wire fans? Of course, this conversation is predicated on when exactly Avon is getting out, which is never confirmed in the show. I'm not going to talk about this too much here, I already have an entire video dedicated to this, but I theorize that the show creators intentionally kept Avon's prison sentence length vague in case they wanted to use him in future seasons. He might only be doing the rest of his original 7 years, or he might be doing 20 years plus, in which case, when he gets out, he'll be old and most of the established gangster characters will be dead anyway. It's implied through his sister that the Barksdales don't have the cash they used to, so if people who went down to protect Avon aren't getting paid, they might start flipping to get reduced sentences, and Avon gets more and more years added onto his. But in the case that he gets out after a few years, I don't necessarily agree that he'll just walk out into Westside Baltimore as a king and take his seat at the head of the co-op, and I think it's naive to think Slim would just give up his senior position in the co-op to Avon. Look, I know Avon is one of the more beloved figures of The Wire. He has a code. He has some great human moments, like when he lets Cutty go, and compared to his successor Marlo, he is way more likable. And the idea that after it's all said and done, after all the players come and go, the first kingpin in the show, the original gangster Avon Barksdale, lies in wait and returns to take his throne, the king stays the king, all of that is great to speculate on. I like the idea. But with this series showing us the cycles of the drug trade, the cynical, never-ending nature of the trade, and the fact that the players are just cogs in this great machine that is the game, it actually goes against the ethos of the show for there to be one major player in the drug trade to be ever present. In chess, one king has to get trapped in the end, as Avon was when the cops busted through the warehouse in Season 3. In reality, the king doesn't stay the king, but the game stays the game. And it's bigger than Avon. The game continues, just with different players. Avon's cameo in Season 5 was a nice callback for fans, and a way to incorporate him into the narrative, but really, his story is finished, which is probably why he doesn't appear in the Season 5 final montage. Avon clearly has some kind of status in prison. Up in this bitch here, he's what you might call an authority figure, but outside of the can, who exactly is he, really? His heavy hitters like Weebay are doing life in prison. Most of the Barksdale organization was sent down. Guys like Stringer and Bodie are dead. Guys like Slim have moved on. And even Avon's own sister has said money has dried up. So what tangible power does Avon have to wrestle power out of Slim Charles's hands? And why would Slim willingly give it up to Avon? He hasn't worked with Avon in years. And even when he did, he was hired muscle. And then he went to work for Avon's rival. People like to point to Slim's line about not being cut out to be no CEO.
Meaning no disrespect, but I ain't cut out to be no CEO.
And that might have been the case at the time. But that's really more of an indication of his intelligence not to fly too close to Marlowe, lest he get burnt. After everything Slim's worked for, after how high he's climbed, he's just gonna say, "There you go, sir," and wipe Avon's seat clean? Not a chance. That's not how things work. It wouldn't even be Slim say so. He's not the boss of the co-op. There is no boss. He's just a senior member. I mean, look at the way Bodie was on his own after the Barksdales fell, lucky to be given a package by Slim, just because he liked the young buck. And there's nothing Avon would be able to do about it. In fact, he's at a stage where he has more power inside prison than he does out of it. He was a boss, so to speak, inside the can, and was able to exert power and influence. Slim and the co-op would be wary of Avon's methods, the same thing that got him locked up in the first place, and they wouldn't want him anywhere near their setup. Thing about the old days, they're the old days. Sure, he'll have respect, but that would only get him so far, like it did Cutty. I can see Slim incorporating Avon back into the mix, but not thrusting him into a position of leadership. They'd probably feel Avon out, see what he's still capable of, and what he wants to do. If Avon was willing, he'd still be an asset to Westside in terms of business, real estate, warfare, connections, all sorts, and he could come in handy. Maybe the co-op are pulling their hair out in frustration because they keep getting robbed by an adult Michael with a shotgun, and they use Avon to organize security. But the co-op would not be obliged to indulge Avon. Slim isn't that much of a sentimental motherfucker. They had a working relationship and both knew it. The game is the game. Avon's organization got taken out and he went to jail. End of story. If he does get out and still wants to be part of the game, I think he'd swallow his pride and accept the co-op was the way of doing things now, and would accept a mid-tier position. And to be honest, he'd probably be okay with it, accepting he had his time on the throne and he still commands respect. Heck, by the time he gets out, Slim Charles might be dead. So to the guys who actually knew Avon Barksdale, and the guys running the show now might be younger guys who are aware of his rep but have no allegiance to him. Look how Bodie treated Cutty when he came to him and Slim Charles. It doesn't matter what Cutty did years ago to earn a rep, the here and now is more important. It actually links to a much bigger thing which we can discuss in another video about these gangsters, and in The Sopranos too, basically being duped into thinking that when they go to prison, when they do decades in the can for their families, they'll come out and be treated like kings and retake their seats on the throne and all sorts, when that isn't the case at all. Would Avon even want it? Maybe Avon's changed and actually sees the co-op as the way forward. Maybe he's achieved everything he wanted to in the game and wants to live quietly. Maybe he's transformed. And The Wire Season 6 goes full circle by giving Avon a redemption arc where he leaves the gangster lifestyle and tells his story to a TV crew who are creating a show called The Wire, just like how the guy who Avon is based off did in real life. Wouldn't that be something? The point I'm making is that Avon may have changed and become a different person by the time he got out. They could give him a completely new storyline, and quite frankly, having him come back and trying to take over has already been done. Perhaps Avon becomes like one of the older head guys, an advisor like Butchie or the guy at Marlowe's rim shop. Semi-retired, his voice important, connected, making some money here and there getting his cut, but not really at the forefront of things. If the game is truly all Avon knows, he could still be a part of it as a respected old-timer, but the days of him being a boss are realistically gone. In fact, if he himself is unable to deal with this fact, he could end up like guys like Richie Aprile and The Sopranos, angry that the world has moved on without him and frustrated, feeling like he hasn't been given his dues, a relic causing problems for everyone, and eventually he is popped. I don't quite see that. I mean, Even in Avon's prison meeting with Marlowe, he seems to possess a mindset that the game is above and beyond everyone, and everybody's just a player in this game. In fact, the Deacon, whose life Avon is based on, reformed and became a church-going man trying to make things better in society, much like how Michael became Omar and Dookie became Bubbles. Maybe the inclusion of the man Avon is based off in this show is actually the wise way of telling us what happens to Avon Barksdale. But I know I'm making a stretch here. If Avon did truly want to become king again, he'd have to take the crown by force, and that pretty much means starting over because there's nothing to come home to. Using resources he has, his rep, real estate, money to hire guns, his connection to New York, maybe some young'uns who idolize him joining his crew, maybe he gets lucky and gets a few really competent soldiers, but it would involve having to start over, rebuilding and clawing his way back to the top corner by corner, and he'd probably die doing it, which wouldn't be a problem for him. After all, the game is the game, and the streets is all Avon knows. Perhaps Avon gets out and sees Slim Charles and Fat-Faced Rick as pretenders, imposters sitting on his throne, and he launches himself into a war against everybody. So what do you think? Do you see Avon getting out and wanting the crown? Do you see Rick and Charles giving it to him? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.